And I'm Randy Credico, and we have Kelly Lane joining us from, not joining us, but she's engineering. We slapped this thing together a few hours ago because of when I ran across Gabriel yesterday. I received two simultaneous text messages, one from Sebem, the German legislator, and one from Angela, who was on our show a week and a half ago. And they had sent me a link to this Daily Mail article where Julian Assange had suffered a stroke, something that will be no surprise to our special guest, Nils Melzer. We'll get to him in just 1 second. So, I spoke to Gabriel. I just met him in the subway. We were stuck in the subway for half an hour. Went to my friend Steve's house for dinner. And of course, he was very concerned about it. This had happened way back, not way back, but in October. But this, as I said, came as no surprise to our first. I may as well get right into it. I am Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico, special edition of Assange Countdown to Freedom on the Progressive Radio Network here at 10 a.m. in the morning in New York City on Monday. Today, Monday at noon, there is a rally at the British Consulate. I mentioned it. We're going to have one of the organizers in on the other hour that we're going to do special and talk about it. And Katie Halper later on. Gabriel's going to join us midway through this show. And let me just get right into give you the details of that event tomorrow, which we all talked about the other day with Roger and John Pilger, the need for direct action. And welcome back on such quick notice, Dr. Melzer.
Thanks for having me.
You've been talking about this. You've done so much on what the prison conditions, the legal quagmire, the unflagging persecution on so many levels and from so many different angles. I guess you weren't surprised by this. It comes as no surprise. You kind of you didn't want it to happen, but it's not a surprise to you that this would happen, this stroke that Mr. Assange suffered.
No, it didn't come as a surprise. Obviously, it's always tragic when events materialize like this. But you see, I visited Julian Assange 2.5 years ago when he first was arrested by the British authorities after almost 7 years in increasingly oppressive circumstances at the embassy of Ecuador in London. At the time, he already showed all the symptoms that are typical for a victim of psychological torture. And I have said this all along, and people keep underestimating what that actually means. Psychological torture is not torture light. It is a clandestine form of torture where through isolation, arbitrariness, threat, destabilization, disorientation, and basically attrition, people are being destroyed. Their identity is being destroyed. Their mental resilience is being destroyed. And it ends up at the end having physical consequences. At the time already, we could measure physical damage, neurological damage, cognitive harm that had been caused by extreme levels of relentless stress and anxiety that is not comparable to what any prisoner would go through. It really eats at the nervous system. And it's difficult to predict exactly how this plays out, over a period of months and years, but almost inevitably it will end up having physical consequences and it can endanger life. So strokes, it could be a cardiac arrest, it could be a nervous breakdown, but very serious consequences almost inevitably results at the end of the lane.
He was in the embassy. That in and of itself, not knowing your fate causes psychological stress and anxiety. Going from the frying pan into the fire, the prison at Belmarsh, did that intensify the stress and anxiety, the psychological torture?
Well, you see, what's really important to understand that in psychological torture, it's a mental, emotional process. So the most important element of this is the threat scenario, that someone is under constant threat, that he feels that he is constantly in danger. And that feeling clearly increased exponentially once he had to leave the embassy, which used to be, his place of asylum, his basically the refuge from the threat scenario that he was most afraid of, the extradition to the United States. And lo and behold, in the first hour when he was expelled from the embassy, the United States actually transmitted its extradition request to the United Kingdom. So he had been right all along that he, sought for asylum at the embassy. And so clearly that threat scenario became much more real and concrete once he was in the hands of the United States' closest ally, the United Kingdom. And as, anyone who was under an illusion that he would now benefit from a due process proceeding in the United Kingdom, as would have been, consistent with the rule of law tradition of the country, clearly was disappointed from the very outset. From the first day, the UK judiciary made very clear that it had no intention of granting Julian Assange a due process proceeding, because that would have meant that this whole extradition case would have been thrown out, very early, because there is no way of legally extraditing him. So all along, with every single procedural step in this proceeding, Julian Assange was, told very clearly and shown very clearly that all he could expect from the British authorities was arbitrariness and persecution. And so incrementally, this increased his stress level very quickly to levels that were life-threatening already 2 years ago. Now, this is fluctuating, obviously.
Well, when you visited him back in Belmarsh when he first came, I think it was April or May.
9th of May,
2019.
9th of May, yeah.
2019. You went there with a doctor as well. What was his assessment of his, for those who don't know, of his physical health at that point in time?
Yeah, well, I can't disclose the medical diagnosis because of the doctor confidentiality. But as far as it is relevant for my mandate, clearly both doctors, I went every 2 doctors who separately from each other examined him, and both of them are specialized in examining torture victims. One a forensic expert, the other a psychiatrist, and both came to the conclusion that he showed all the symptoms that are typical for a victim of psychological torture. So again, intense anxiety, intense distress, post-traumatic stress disorder of major proportions. So both of them told me, and I then warned the British authorities that if this pressure, this relentless pressure of his persecution and isolation and arbitrariness, if that was not relieved quickly, then he could rapidly enter a downward spiral that would endanger his life. That was our message to the British authorities 2019. Now here we are 2 years later, and it begins to materialize in a minor stroke for now. It seems that he has recovered medically. I haven't been able to visit or examine him, but my sources tell me that he has recovered for the time being, but is under anti-stroke treatment. But then, this is usually an indicator. I'm not a medical doctor, but from experience, I can say that, these minor strokes can be indicator of a major or full strokes, basically, awaiting in the near future.
Well, walk us through. I mean, you didn't spend 24 hours there, but envisioning, seeing where the room that he inhabits, the prison cell that he inhabits. Walk us through what is it like? What is the daily routine for those people who do not know that he undergoes on a 24-hour basis?
Well, for most of the time, he has been detained in conditions that are equivalent to solitary confinement, which means 22 to 23, up to 24 hours alone in a cell that is perhaps, what would that be, 6 feet by 9 feet in American measurements, 3 by 2 meters size. And now you see the physical conditions of detention, they are in accordance with international standards in the sense that the cell is equipped, it's obviously very sparse, but that's not the problem. The problem is the isolation, which on a prolonged basis amounts to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. Any one of us can spend a few hours alone. Any one of us can perhaps even spend 48 hours alone or 72, but you will then quickly realize once you're being isolated for a week or more that your thoughts start turning in circles, that you start being tormented by your anxiety, what's expecting you, what's awaiting you at the end of this experience. You don't have enough access to your lawyers to prepare your defense. So this again increases your anxiety. You don't receive information, or you receive correspondence with 2 months delay. So you're being called to a court hearing. You don't know what to expect. You're being asked to answer a U.S. indictment you have not been able to read. All of this increases your anxiety. You're alone with yourself 24 hours a day, basically, perhaps with short interruptions of an hour or so. And that really has a very, very harmful effect, to the extent that the international community agreed in its United Nations minimum standards for the treatment of all prisoners around the world, regardless of the category of prisoner, that more than 15 consecutive days of isolation amounts to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment, or even torture, and is in any case absolutely prohibited.
Well, Nils, it's not just Julian. What is the effect? I know you haven't died, but it's had obviously an impact on his partner and his children, particularly his partner. You saw. I want to play this quick clip. She came out the other day after that decision, and we were going to play this for you the other day. If Kelly has it lined up, let's play that clip when she, if you don't mind. I want to play this for the audience out there. Very dignified, an incredible statement, but she's under a lot of stress. Kelly, do you have that lined up?
Today is International Human Rights Day. What a shame. How cynical to have this decision on this day, to have one of the foremost publisher, journalist of the past 50 years in a UK prison, accused of publishing the truth about war crimes, about CIA kill teams. And in fact, every time we have a hearing, we know more about the abusive nature, the criminal nature of this case. Julian exposed the crimes of CIA torturers, of CIA killers, and now we know that those CIA killers were planning to kill him too. How can these courts approve an extradition request under these conditions? How can they accept an extradition to the country that plotted to kill Julian, that plotted to kill a publisher because of what he published? This goes to the fundamentals of press freedom and of democracy. We will fight. Every generation has an epic fight to fight, and this is ours, because Julian represents the fundamentals of what it means to live in a free society, of what it means to have press freedom, of what it means for journalists to do their jobs without being afraid of spending the rest of their lives in prison. The UK imprisons journalists. They're imprisoning Julian on behalf of a foreign power which is taking an abusive, vindictive prosecution against a journalist, and this is what it's about.
All right. That was Stella Morris. Nils, your reaction to what she said, and expand on it from where I guess you would concur with everything that she said, because you've said similar things in the past. So why don't you just take it from here?
Oh, absolutely. Obviously, she's absolutely right in her assessment. It certainly, absolutely, I concur. This confirms the conclusions of my own investigation that I reached after, meticulously going through the evidence. As someone, I remind everybody, who I didn't want to get engaged in this case originally because I have been so strongly uh, uh, negatively affected by that public narrative pushed by the media about Assange for the past decade. And only when I looked into the case and I looked at the actual facts, I saw that nothing of that false narrative really could be proven. But I found lots of contradictions. I saw manipulation of evidence. I saw collusion between those various authorities. The authorities in their interaction with me, with my mandate, as someone who is mandated by states to do what I'm doing. I'm not an NGO, I'm not an activist, I'm not a journalist. I'm actually mandated by states to monitor their compliance with the prohibition of torture. So they refuse to engage with me in discussing this case. And basically refused to answer questions, became extremely defensive, accused me of having lost my impartiality and neutrality simply because, based on objective facts, I confronted them with facts and I asked them to explain to me how this was compatible with their human rights obligations. And they basically refused to engage in any dialogue with me, which clearly is a very bad sign, because I remind you, I work with all UN member states. That's 193 states. And my experience is, as soon as a state has evidence that their conduct is lawful, they're very keen to present that evidence to me. So when states say they have no comment or they don't want to engage in the discussion, it is clear they have something to hide. So that is extremely shocking, particularly because we're talking about Western democracies who traditionally would be my allies in, the fight against torture around the world. And here we see that they have deeply betrayed those principles for political purposes in persecuting Assange.
Well, they ignored your finding. They ignored an earlier finding by the UN back in 2016 that said he was illegally being, held, and they said he deserved compensation and immediate release. They ignored that one. They've ignored Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Reporters Without Borders, the ACLU, and a whole, 100 different organizations. Is this a pre-written script to you, and what you're doing is getting in the way of the final chapter?
My impression really is that the latest since his expulsion from the embassy, and probably much earlier, what we're witnessing is just a plot being played out according to the script, and that anything that comes in the way is removed, by any means necessary. And it just speaks to the fact of how threatened states feel by the mechanism that WikiLeaks has offered. And again, let's just be very clear. All they do is offer a platform where whistleblowers can submit secret information about providing evidence about serious misconduct by states. Now, in any democracy, the public should know about misconduct, of states. So if they don't know that, it is because the mainstream media, is not doing their job. And so it is no surprise that an actor like WikiLeaks appears. But that's an absolutely essential function in any democracy, because without transparency, without access to what's really going on, to the truth of what's really going on behind closed doors in government circles, we cannot be democracies. We cannot oversee what our governments are doing with our tax money and with the power we have delegated to them. So it's an absolutely essential function. And if anyone is still under the illusion that these states are prosecuting Assange in good faith, then just look at what he's being accused of: receiving and publishing secret information as someone who has no duty of non-disclosure, who's not an American citizen, has not been in the United States, who has no contract with the United States. He's simply a publisher. On the other hand, however, he has provided evidence for the most serious crimes recognized by the international community, such as torture, murder of civilians, and very grave corruption. And none of these acts has ever been prosecuted.
We are talking with Nils Melzer, the Special Rapporteur on Torture at the UN. In a minute, we'll be talking, we'll be joined by Julian Assange's brother, Gabriel Shipton. I just want to, I want you to stick around, Nils. I want to ask you, so I got a feeling that you believe that the authorities in the U.S., the prosecutors here and in the UK, didn't lose much sleep over this, recent medical condition or the stroke. Do you actually think that it's okay for them if he just wilts away and dies?
Well, I cannot speak for the authorities, but they clearly have no sense of responsibility for the health and, for the rule of law in general. Because let's remind everybody that there is no case against Julian Assange that could be called lawful in any sense. He has not broken any law. He's published true information providing evidence for serious crimes. That's what he has done, while those governments are responsible for serious crimes. So clearly they have a self-interest in trying to avoid accountability and maintain their impunity. It's just very important for the public to realize what the truth is about this case. For them, I think all that matters is to try to silence Julian Assange and to very visibly to the public demonstrate that if ever someone else, another journalist or any activist should have the idea of publishing secret information provided to them, proving misconduct by those powerful states, then this is what we're going to do with you. And it's going to be unlawful. It's even going to be blatantly unlawful. And we're going to demonstrate to you that no one will be able to protect you from it. And my argument is that, irrespective of whether Julian Assange is in the end is extradited to the US or not, or whether he dies in a UK prison, or is institutionalized in this closed psychiatric institution, what matters is that intimidation is working already. Journalists today will certainly hesitate if you provided them with a USB stick and the collateral murder video number 2 and the next 250,000 diplomatic cables. Would they be as keen as they were in 2010 and 11 to publish those things at New York Times and the Guardian and El País and Le Monde and Der Spiegel, or would they now perhaps rather hesitate and look at what has been done to Julian Assange? This is my point. This demonstrates that the intimidation is working already.
Well, you mentioned collateral damage, and I think we have, I think people who are not familiar with it, that may be only a few out there, but we should, if Kelly has that lined up, let's play that short clip collateral damage. You have that set up, Kelly? I see it. I just can't hear it. Oh, there you go.
Master 6, this is Bushmaster 2-6. Got a bunch of bodies laying there. We got about 8 individuals. Yeah, we got one guy crawling around down there, but we could definitely get him some. Or shoot some more. Hey, you shoot, I'll talk. Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18. Crazy Horse 18, this is Hotel 26, over. Roger, currently engaging approximately 8 individuals, KIA, RPGs, and AK-47s. Hotel 26, you need to move to that location once Crazy Horse is done and get pictures over. Sergeant 20 is the location. Hotel 26. Nice. 2-6, Crazy Horse 1-8. Spirit 023, nice. Good shoot. Thank you. Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 1-8. Crazy Horse 1-8, Bushmaster 7, go ahead. And Bushmaster 7, Crazy Horse 1-8. Location of bodies, Mike Bravo, 54588617. Good on the region, that's good. 54588617, over. It's Crazy Horse 1-8, that's a good copy. They're on a street in front of an open courtyard with a bunch of blue trucks, bunch of vehicles in the courtyard. There's one guy moving down there, but he's walking. Alright, we'll let him know so they can hurry up, get over here.
All right.
It's the 1-8. We also have one individual appears to be wounded, trying to crawl away. Roger, we're gonna move
All right.
down there. Roger, we'll see fire. We won't shoot anymore. If he has a weapon in his hand? No, I haven't seen one yet. You guys got that guy crawling right now on the curb? Yeah, I got him. I put a few rounds in here, and you guys are shooting over there. We'll see. Roger that. Bushmaster 36 Element, this is Hotel 27, over. Hotel 27, Bushmaster 7, go ahead. Roger, I'm just trying to make sure that you guys have.
Okay, you get the point there. That was the full video, which seemed longer than Platoon, and it's ghastly. I'm just going to get a comment from you. Stick around, Nils. That's the crime. That's what put him in, basically, showing that.
Well, yeah, well, we have not seen the decisive part where the helicopter team actually fired on that wooden person that we saw at the end. About a minute later, you will see a bus coming in, a civilian minibus trying to rescue the person. And clearly, as you know, a law of war expert for the International Committee of the Red Cross at the time already as a legal advisor, I analyze these types of operations all the time. And it is obvious that even if someone were a combatant, in this case, this wounded man is not a combatant, he's actually a journalist. And he wasn't armed, he wasn't participating in the fighting. But even if he had been before, once he's wounded, there's an absolute protection for wounded persons, civilians and combatants. And the soldiers know that exactly. And that same protection applies to people trying to rescue the wounded. And so what we see just a minute later, but that's a very gruesome scene really, is that the helicopter team intentionally, deliberately, when they see that this person is being rescued, they basically massacre him and the rescuers. And in that minibus were two children who were gravely wounded. They survived, but they were wounded. And that is, without any question, a war crime. There's no discussion, because this is nothing to do with engaging in legitimate combat. And the soldiers know that. And so that really was the most kind of scandalous revelation, the initial video of the collateral murder clip, and that was the opening of the 2010 publications that then continued with the Afghan War Diary and the Iraq War Logs, and then culminated also in the Cablegate publications.
All right, Nils Melzer, stick around. We are joined now by the brother of Julian Assange, Gabriel Shipton, who I have not seen in over 12 hours. Gabriel and I hooked up, and I was telling everybody that we were stuck on the subway for what seemed like a year down there. It was very hot. Gabriel, you knew about this, or did you not know about the stroke by your brother that he had back in October 24th, I think, 26th? Tell us about
it. Well, I think those images we saw of Julian back on those hearing days, those images of him from the video link room at Belmarsh, none of us realized at the time, but he was, he was having, suffering from the symptoms of that mini stroke. So just looking back on that is just like, so I mean, it's unbelievable what he's going through. It's hard to put into words, hard to describe. Julia, it's not, Belmarsh Prison is not, it's not like you can just go down to the hospital or whatever, or go to a doctor. It's still a maximum security prison, so the medical treatment there is good, but it's not, it's not what you would get if he was out on bail back at home. Which he should just be back on bail. Basically, he should be back with his family, which I think is really the big push that we should make at the moment. I don't know what you think about this, Nils, but because they've found, they've approved the appeal on those 2 points, saying that he should be extradited, or the Magistrates Court should order his extradition. Julian will appeal. We will fight it, but because the extradition is approved, that would, to me, give them more reason not to give him bail. So this next series of appeals, I would imagine they're going to keep him in prison, because this threat of extradition is now even more present.
Nils?
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm not part of the legal team, and I don't know what their strategy is. I can just say that from an international law perspective, there is no legal basis for keeping him in a high security prison. There is no even a legal basis for the extradition proceeding. I mean, given all those grave violations that have been committed at the surveillance and basically the prevention of sufficient access to his legal team to prepare his defense. I mean, those, we don't even have to start talking about kidnapping and assassination plots. I mean, and even what's the crime that they're accusing him of? There is no crime even. So I mean, there really is no case, no criminal case against him. There is no legitimate extradition case. The US-UK treaty clearly prohibits extradition for political offenses such as espionage. So all of this has no legal basis. But even if we forget about all of this, just for the purpose of the argument, and say, well, there's a legitimate extradition proceeding going on, yes, you can ensure his presence, in case he should be extradited at the end of that proceeding, which can go on for another couple of years. But you can't use measures that are beyond what's absolutely necessary, the minimum that's necessary in terms of restriction. And that's not a high security prison for someone who's non-violent, not endangering anybody, not having committed any crime, at all. So in his case, obviously house arrest is the maximum you could lawfully do. Yeah. And that certainly is something that the authorities of themselves should do that. It shouldn't be necessary to apply for it, because it's plainly unlawful what they're doing. He should be at home, exercising his profession, living his family life, and if we admit, as I said, for the purpose of the argument, although I don't agree with it legally, that there is a valid extradition case, then possibly at the end of that proceeding, he could be arrested. But there's basically no legal basis for the way he's being treated.
Nils Melzer, UN Rapporteur on Torture, Special Rapporteur on Torture. I'm Randy Critical live on the fly here on the Progressive Radio Network. The producer, and I believe the director of a film called Ithaca, which features Julian's father and your father, John Shipton. It's a big hit. It's playing, I believe, in Gabriel Shipton in Sydney. Hopefully people can see it. And of course, read your book, Nils. I'm going to talk about your book in a minute. So Gabriel, what kind of toll has this taken on your father and what you know about Stella, because you're fairly close with both of them?
Yeah, I spoke to John yesterday, and he's, it's particularly low moment. Try and keep it all in perspective, and look at what's in the future. What steps can we take now to keep fighting for Julian's freedom? And try and look at it as, I think this was always going to end up in the Supreme Court by either side, and so this is just one step closer to the European Court of Human Rights, which I think I think everyone's, I think that's our best chance of getting, Julian out. So this is try and put it in perspective and look at this as the next step towards the European Court of Human Rights. I think at the moment, what this judgment says is that the US people in the USA can no longer deny that this case is going to come to them eventually. They can't rely on the British courts to reject this extradition. The chief magistrate, the highest judge in England and Wales, has approved this extradition. So it becomes very difficult to appeal that ruling. So I think the people in particularly in the DOJ or in the Congress or in the Biden administration, they need to take a stand on this case now. They can no longer rely on the British courts. They can no longer afford to ignore it. It is coming, and they need to take a position. And I think that's what we need to do. And we're doing this protest tomorrow. Is that right, Randy?
Yes, at noon in New York City, in front of the British UK consulate on 47th and 2nd Avenue. A sizable amount of people are coming. I know you'll be there. Margaret Kunstler is coming, and I'll be there. And so let me ask you, Nils, what are our options right now? Is that it? Getting on the street? People reading your book? Do we need to influence public opinion?
Well, I mean, clearly the institutions of of the state are failing before our eyes, and they have been failing for a decade in his case, whether from in Sweden or the UK during the extradition proceeding to Sweden, even the Ecuadorian institutions. Once then he was being he was expelled from the embassy and the US institutions. So that's. And even now with the United Nations, I make the same experience. And that is really extremely concerning, because it means that we have a systemic failure. It's not just, a bump in the road. It's really a black hole where you can say, as soon as those perceived national security interests are at stake, and there really aren't national security interests, they're impunity interests of officials that have committed serious crimes. That's what this is really about. As soon as those interests of the powerful are at stake, democracy and the rule of law no longer functions. And that, I think, really points to what this is about, and why this is something that everybody and their kids should be worried about. What kind of world is being created here in front of my eyes? That's the reason why, because through the diplomatic channels at the disposal of my office, I could no longer achieve a compliance by those states with international law. I decided to inform the public about this systemic failure, and that's what this book is about, that I have written, that will be published in February in Verso Books. This is what it looks like: the trial of Julian Assange, a story of persecution. Yes.
Yeah, and it's fantastic that you've written that book, Nils, because I often talk about this, is that the persecution of Julian is it's like another revelation. It's like another WikiLeaks revelation. It's exposed all these institutions. It's exposed corruption at every level. So, it's not only the WikiLeaks revelations that, exposed war crimes and torture and things like that. The persecution of Julian has also done the same thing. And I think it's a book like yours that can map that out. I think that, it's really, I hope it has an effect on that we're able to sort of look back at this and rebuild, in 10 years time or something like that. But I think, yeah, it's a great effort.
Well, that I think that's the only thing that's left to us, that we make people understand that this is not, I know it's about Julian Assange for you and his father and for himself and for his partner and his children and his friends, but it's really for the rest of us out here. It's about us. I want to say to anybody watching this, it's about you and your rights and your children's rights. And your right to know what your government is doing with your tax money and the power you have delegated to it. And it's really, if this goes down the drain, excuse my French, we're going to be living in a tyranny, and nobody's rights will be safe. And so I feel that what's really important is that the media start assuming their role as the fourth estate here, and they hold those governments to account, that they start asking uncomfortable questions. I am convinced if the main news outlets in the US, in the UK, in Australia confronted their own governments with the real question, rather than just reporting, the he said and she said of the court proceedings, but actually asked uncomfortable questions about what this really is about and why none of the war crimes and none of the torture incidents and none of the corruption cases has ever been prosecuted that WikiLeaks brought evidence for. Why is the justice system being turned upside down in this case? I'm convinced that this could stop this case completely in its tracks and could bring Assange to freedom, because that's what the governments are afraid of, is the spotlight. That's precisely why they're persecuting him, because that's precisely what WikiLeaks has done. If the main media institutions started doing that job again, that would be the end of his persecution.
The name of the book is The Trial of Julian Assange in English, and I've sent some, I know you have, advanced copies or PDF versions. And if there are journalists out there who are listening on Monday or watching this later, you would be happy to send them a PDF file or an advanced copy, because I think now it's critical for them to get their hands on it before February, so they can see, because you've done such an incredible diagnosis of what happened and what is happening here. But getting back to where do we go from here? I know that we have to inform, if we got the journalists out there in the media, big media, to take this seriously, that would be helpful. The demonstrations would be helpful. I mean, Gabriel, it's like we can't sit here and despair and feel hopeless. We got to do something.
Yeah, I think that protest on Monday is a great example. Direct action. It's very, very powerful. We've got to get what is the asses of the masses, I think you say, Red,
yes,
in American. But yeah, I think direct action is very powerful, as well as what's worked in Australia is contacting your elected representative. But just call them every day if you have to. Just keep on telling them that you care about your right to know, and what this case means to everybody, to your democratic rights, to that you care what happens with your tax dollars, that you care what is done in your name. So I think ring your elected officials, whether it's Congress people or whether it's a politician in Australia. I don't know if this is going internationally, but write to them, write to your elected officials. Just put the pressure on. Another thing that can be done is a small local petition and given to your Congress people. We've had success with that in the US. Some organizers locally in Massachusetts are able to get meetings with Congress staffers by filling out a petition and presenting it to the Congress people or senators. So that's another way to do it. Those small localized petitions are made up of people in the constituency and you can take those to the Congress people to get meetings to express your concern about what this case means for your rights.
Nils, you continue to be out there. You're incredible. You're the ever-ready rabbit that just keeps going and going and going. And I don't sense a sense of demoralization in you. I think that you are going to be working relentlessly in every capacity that you're capable of to move forward and try to get some relief here.
Well, look, it's, as I said, this is obviously an important case for Julian Assange himself, but he is as important as anybody else who is being subjected to torture, and we have millions of victims in the world. But my real concern is what this means for, for the rule of law and human rights and the sustainability of Western democracy. And that's a very important issue that I really feel, if I can use my mandate for something, it is to draw attention to what's really going on behind the scenes here, and to wake people up. It's a wake up call. Also, my interventions are, my public statements are, my book is, the purpose is to wake people up to what's actually going on and what's happening to their world and what kind of world we're about to create. It's a world where it has become a crime to tell the truth. It is a world where the criminals have the right to classify the evidence against them. Imagine if you bring a murderer to court and the murderer has the right to classify all the evidence against him, and anybody disclosing it will be punished. That is the reality already today under the Espionage Act. It's the reality today under the Official Secrets Act in the UK. And lo and behold, Sweden is about to create its own Espionage Act. It's already approved by Parliament. It will enter into force in January 2023. That makes it a crime for anybody to disclose secret information that could harm Sweden's relations to another state or international organization. I mean, Sweden was chosen by WikiLeaks in 2010 as a potential host state because it was the safe haven of press freedom in the world. So we're that far now that this country is adopting the same approach. Look at Australia persecuting whistleblowers and having similar interpretations of secrecy laws as the UK and the US. We're really going worldwide in this direction. And I think the citizens of Western democracies have become too comfortable. They take their freedoms for granted. And as one of the most important quotes in my book is by a German resistance lawyer during the Second World War who opposed the Nazis. And he said, basically, if you fall asleep in a democracy, you will wake up in a tyranny. And that's exactly the situation we are in right now. And most people are just still sleeping.
Yeah, well, I agree. The other day we were talking with Roger Waters. In fact, I know he's watching. If he texts me, we'll have him join us. And he, of course, has been a very powerful figure in this movement. And Gabriel, we need more Roger Waters out there at this point in time. Why aren't there more people like him? I mean, he's in a class by himself as an activist, as a legendary musician and songwriter. Why aren't there more out there? Have you approached other artists? I know there are some in London that have been there, but on the level of a Roger Waters, why aren't there more, Julian?
Well, I think, obviously there's been years and years of these sort of attacks on Julian through the press, destroying his character. They really have done a wonderful job at giving him the sort of ick factor that has put a lot of people off on this case. But it's starting. I think the momentum is changing. We're really sort of making some, ground now, I think, and there are other people becoming interested. Obviously things like your book, Nils, through the film that we did with John and Stella. These things we're changing the narrative around this case. We're telling a different perspective than what people experience through the media, and so now we're seeing, I think, more and more people coming on board. This decision yesterday has galvanized people. People realize now that this is not going. The court, they can't rely on the English justice system. This is not going to stop, and it's going to continue. And so people are waking up, and there's this protest plan, which I think we're going to be very surprised at the number of people that are down there tomorrow. And yeah, people are going to start coming on. We're going to get more and more people joining us. Roger Waters, obviously, he's led the way. There are other celebrities who are involved, and that's great. Hugo Weaving, an Australian actor, he came and watched Ithaca at the premiere in Sydney at Sydney Film Festival, and he came out of the cinema and made a statement about the case. So there's people who are always joining, and we have to engage them through things like books and films and show them a different side of this story and wake them up. Yeah, that's right. They have to wake up to what's really happening. And once they realize what is actually happening and what is actually going on, then it's hard for them to not join this cause. Like, why wouldn't you join this cause if you actually knew what was going on? So I think the work that we're doing, the work that you do, Randy, is also integral to this changing, convincing people and telling them what's really going on.
I want you guys to stick around for a few more minutes. Nils not only is a great activist, a great lawyer, and his writer of books, but he also plays the piano. And we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to say goodbye to our audience at the Progressive Radio Network and come back with some of the activists, Katie Halper and our friends here from NYC, Free Assange, because they're both going to be there tomorrow at the demonstration. Can you guys hold on? We're going to play this. This is, I don't know which clip this is, but this is Nils Melzer on the piano, and we'll be right back. Oh, that's beautiful, Nils. If Kelly could send Roger Waters a link to this show, he'd like to join us. So I know, Gabriel, you got to jump off, but stick around until he comes back with us. How much longer are you going to be in town, by the way? And while you're here, you must have some plans. They may be private and involved with Julian, but I know that you're going to be here for a few more days. And people who want to contact you and show some support to the movie or whatever, people need to feel like they have an outlet to do something here. So if you could possibly tell us how people can reach you, how they can access that film.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Gabriel Shipton. My DMs are open, so yeah, just send me a message. I can respond to those. Gabriel Shipton at protonmail.com is my email if you want to, message me on email. GabrielShipton at protonmail.com. I'm here. I'm in the States, I think, till next week, till the end of next week. We're doing, as much media as we can, trying to, just get the message out there about Julian's prosecution or the persecution of Julian and what it means to people. It's about them. It's about their rights, their right to know. So, yeah, just pushing out that message here. Obviously, after the judgment, there's a lot of interest. People are. I think finding people are outraged. I've got a lot of contacts in the sort of crypto community, and they're also galvanizing now. There's a free Assange movement developing there. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of people are galvanizing around this decision, which is obviously it's a bad decision, but in a way it's woken some people up, which is helpful.
Okay. We're going to put on for a minute here before we go to Roger, Chuck Slatkin. Chuck, can you give us, if you're there,
yes,
information for tomorrow at the demonstration? Chuck is
okay.
with Free Assange.
It's important for people to be aware of the fact that, yes, tomorrow is the day at 12 noon at 885 2nd Avenue, which is the northwest corner of 2nd Avenue and 47th Street. We will be there in front of the British consulate to let the world know how we feel, and that it's important for people to get out and speak, take action, because, that's what's left is us. So we really have to be out there and fight for the freedom for Julian Assange.
How do people reach NYC Free Assange?
Well, NYC Free Assange, at NYC Free Assange, on Twitter, on Facebook, and we have a website, www.nycfreeassange.org. So we're accessible that way.
All right. Thank you, Chuck. I'm going to go back to you, Nils, here, because Kelly brought this up about the study by the neuroscientist that was totally dismissed by, I think, you talked about this a few weeks ago. I don't remember. Is there something with a neuroscientist? They had some kind of study that they found that they went to either the UN and then they went to some assembly and it was dismissed.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Randy. I'm sorry.
Well, I obviously. Well, let me just go ahead and say, why are they dismissing everything that's thrown at them? Everybody, the Crown prosecutors, their involvement with the Swedes, the FOIA stuff, the UC Global stuff, the attempts on his life by the CIA, possibly. And then, of course, all of this is Ziggy. I mean, there's so much stuff in his favor, Julian. Why are they dismissing all of this?
Well, because obviously they want to silence him, because he's exposing their dirty secrets. Look, for the broader public, it's important for them to understand that what's going on here is that there's a powerful elite that tries to protect themselves through secrecy and to grant themselves impunity. This has never been about national security, because when asked even by the British judges, the US has been unable to point to any security risks that has been actually caused by those revelations of WikiLeaks. And we're talking about literally hundreds of thousands of documents. Not a single one has actually posed a security threat. So this is not about national security. And I remind you, and perhaps for those who don't know, in 2013, when he was presided the so-called elders, former US President Jimmy Carter reacted when he was asked to comment on the revelations of WikiLeaks, he said that he actually did not oppose those himself. That he said that in his view, secrecy most of the time is not being used by government agents for legitimate purposes, but to cover up for their own misconduct. So even a former US president recognized that. And so this is the reality. And the public should start realizing that here legal institutions are being intentionally, deliberately abused for political purposes, for self-serving purposes of granting impunity to themselves for the most serious crimes that have ever been codified by humanity, speaking of torture and war crimes. This is what this is about. This is not about anything like bail violation, come on, and or disclosing secret evidence for I mean, what's the crime here? It's once you see behind the curtain, it becomes very simple. This is what this is about. And our society should decide whether, do we want this? Do we want to be governed by a small minority that can grant itself impunity for the most serious crimes, that can exploit the rest of humanity with impunity, and you as a citizen who's actually supposed in a democracy to govern, if you allow yourself to ask questions, to hold your government to account, you are going to be called a spy and a traitor. And those who give you the evidence for what's going on are going to be called criminals. Do you really want to live in a world like this? Ask yourself, because that's what's happening.
Nils Melzer, the name of the book is The Trial of Julian Assange. Roger Waters joins us from the studio, I believe. Roger, good seeing you again, and thank you for joining us. Your thoughts about all that you saw today and the news about Julian having this stroke.
Well, it's devastating, obviously, emotionally. I can't imagine how Gabriel's feeling, or Stella or John. But I've been watching you since 3:00 when you started this program, and there's sort of very little I can add to what Nils has been saying so eloquently for the last hour. It's weird. It's a bit like you feel like he's like Thor with a hammer, and he's kind of going around the world banging these morons over the head. And I'm talking about the politicians, obviously, partly him, but I'm talking about the rest of us and saying, wake up. This is your world they're destroying. This is your freedom that's being destroyed. This is the beginning of the end of you having, not that you ever really had a say in any of this bullshit, but this is absolutely the end of anybody being allowed to speak the truth about anything that doesn't suit them.
Well,
I sent a tweet earlier, right? I retweeted that this was going out not long ago, a few minutes ago.
I saw it.
Well, if you're not watching it, I said, you should be watching it, especially Biden and Blinken and Boris effing Johnson, because you're cowards. You're cowardly scum, the three of you. But more important than who you are personally and how you behave, you are letting the rest of us down. You are letting us sink into this morass of tyranny where nobody is allowed to speak. I was sitting here just now, apart from thinking, oh Christ, I hope my hair looks all right, because I haven't got a comb. But I was listening to what Nils was saying about the Swedes and about how they have passed a law, their own Official Secrets Act, that it will become illegal in Sweden for anybody to say anything that I think what he said was that might contribute in a negative way to Sweden's relationship with other states. So it's like this is a private club and human beings are not invited. This is for these things called states to deal one with another. I mean, last week I was sitting watching the aftermath of a court proceeding in The Hague, where my friend Ismail Ziada was told, no, you cannot sue Benny Gantz and the bloke who dropped the bomb and killed 6 members of your family on July the 21st, 2014 in Gaza. No, you can't sue them because they're protected by sovereign immunity. The immunity of the, but we're so, can't I even take out a civil suit because they've destroyed my life completely? They killed my mother and my father and a brother and a blah, 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 blah. No, you can't. Oh, my goodness. But I thought there was supposed to be something called international humanitarian law. Well, there is. Nils could tell us a lot more about it than I could. I know I'm changing the subject, and I don't mean to, because I actually was listening just now to what Gabriel was saying about how we are, or maybe it's not we, maybe it's the fact that the powers that be, the ruling elite, are behaving so appallingly badly and have done for the last 10 years in the case of Julian Assange, that they've actually stumbled over themselves in their desire to protect themselves and their calumny and their infamy, all right? That actually they've stumbled into the blaze of a searchlight that is being shone on them by you and by Nils Melzer and his new book that is coming out on February the 8th here in this country. It's been out in Germany, in German. My German's not all that good, so I haven't been able to read it yet, but as soon as I can get hold of an English version, I'm going to, because listening to it. What?
Nils, do you concur, or is that all hyperbole, what we just heard from great Roger Waters?
No, clearly. I mean, that's what this is about, right? It's really about the world that's being created before our eyes. And, do we want to participate in this world, or do we want the 99% of us leave it to 1%, of the world's population governing us just according to their own interests and granting themselves impunity for their crimes? Absolutely. Look, this is a decisive time. All we can do is offer this truth to people, or they will find out sooner or later, but in a painful, much more painful way than we're already finding out now.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that, what can we do? Well, Chuck, I was listening to what you were saying as well. Yeah, I'll be there. Do I want to go to New York tomorrow? No, I think don't. I can't think of anything I want to do less than going to New York tomorrow. But I'll bloody well be there outside the British consulate at noon tomorrow, standing with my brothers and sisters and saying, don't let these MFs destroy our planet with their tyranny. And this is, the way they're treating Julian, you have to put yourself in his, how would you feel if it was you? We always have to do that. That is what empathy is. We have to be able to put ourselves into the shoes of another human being. And it doesn't matter if it's Ismail Ziada his family being wiped out before his eyes in Gaza, or if it's our brother, Julian Assange, being slowly murdered by the UK government at the behest of the United States of America government in Belmarsh prison. Put yourself in those. I can't even begin to. When you were talking, Nils, about how if you're alone for an hour, it's not too bad. 8 hours is pushing it a bit. 10 hours, 12 hours is a long time to be alone. 16 hours, now you're beginning to crawl up the walls. Okay, 22 years of that. Oh my God. I mean, the pounding in my head when I even think about it is making me almost weep with frustration, so none of us can possibly imagine what it's like for Julian and the thousands of others in a similar position, who've heard the jackboot kicking in the door and have been dragged off and incarcerated with no recourse to the law. And that's a fundamental thing. I talk about it a lot in songs because it's in my mind and in my heart. Every breath I take, almost, I think, just imagine no recourse to the law. Well, Julian hasn't, because as Nils has pointed out again and again and again and again till he's blue in the face, there is no legal basis for Julian Assange's being in prison, even for a minute.
Mm.
Never mind for 2.5 years or for the rest of his days, So, yeah, let's get passionate about it. And let's call these arseholes out for what they are, because they are scum that they allow this to happen. Anyway, I will be there, Randy. I'll be there.
That's great. Isn't that good news,
Yeah.
Gabriel?
Yeah. We'll see. We'll be down there on the street, doing our thing. So yeah,
on the street, that's the important bit.
Right.
We had a similar conversation like a few days ago on Randy's program again, and this is what Pilger was saying. He was saying the streets, we have to take to the streets. We can't. And there was almost a slight punch up in the public bar, because some of us were trying to bang on about the First Amendment and this and that, and others of us were getting somewhat frustrated at that, because it's very parochial. There's always a lot of talk about America and this and that. Now, well, it is a problem, specifically now with Julian, because the bad players in this are the governments of the United States of America and the government of the United Kingdom at the moment. But these are the arch devils. These are the people we boo in the pantomime when we're children, when they come on stage. Boo! But they are not alone. Behind all of this is the monster of, the monster of neoliberal capitalist economic policies and the way it divides us one from another. And actually, it's probably the fundamental reason why this bullshit is allowed to proceed. I know that's somewhat another subject and another matter, and it is, but this is so important. People are just ignoring it. It's just being ignored. I should be very interested to see how many of us there are on the street. God, please. I know it's inconvenient. Please get out of your beds tomorrow.
I think with you being there, you being there will bring a lot more people, and we're going to put that out tonight. I know Bernadette's going to be sending it out on NYC Free Assange as we speak. And this could go on forever, this conversation. I think we're all feeling a little doleful right now from the back-to-back, first a decision and then this news about him suffering a stroke. So it's a 1-2 punch, and I'm trying to stay energized. I will be out there tomorrow. And let me just get some closing remarks. Let me go to you, Gabriel. I know you got
before that, I just want to repeat where it is tomorrow, so people will know if they just tuned in late. It's 2nd Avenue and 47th Street in New York City, 885 2nd Avenue at 12 noon. Be there, we'll be there. And remember, the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and the right to petition the government. Well, the UK consulate may just be the branch office, but we're going to be out there with speech, assembling, and petitioning.
Well, I may do a Henry David Thoreau thing. I just read Civil Disobedience yesterday and wait for Emerson to come in and say, why are you in jail for blocking the British embassy? I don't know. All right, so thank you for that, Chuck. I'm going to go to you, Gabriel, because I know you got to go. Then we'll go to Roger, and Nils, you'll close it. Just some closing remarks here before we go. Get all the frustration out of you right now.
Yeah, well, I think, this wasn't a decision that we wanted, but I turned it into a positive. I think it's really galvanized people, and I can feel some momentum around people who the outrage is there, and it's going to convert into something. I think I can feel that. So, yeah, looking forward to Monday and continuing on this fight to free Julian.
All right, Nils, you go now, and then we'll close with the poet.
Well, receiving the news of this decision of the appeals court on the 10th of December 2021. The 10th of December is the International Day of Human Rights. The 10th of December 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the UN General Assembly in the hope, that we would create a better future. And this decision basically cancels out the core of the essence of what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is about. It is the negation of it. It's the antithesis of human rights. And this was clear to me already when I saw that verdict. And when I learned that during that hearing, Julian Assange actually had a stroke. And the judges, obviously, when they decided a few weeks later that they would extradite him to the US, they were aware of that. And I remind you, this hearing was about whether Julian Assange's health is strong enough to withstand an extradition and a show trial in the US. Now, isn't that the culmination of cynicism? That a hearing where the defendant cannot even follow the hearing because his state of health is so weak, and he's even having a stroke during that hearing. And then the judges come to the decision that he can be extradited to the US based on some set of flimsy assurances that everybody who just takes the time to read those 5 points of those assurances will immediately realize that the US has not given any assurances whatsoever, that they have kept all their options open. I mean, it's just so blatant. Yes, as others have just said, the only positive thing is that now the abuse, the grotesque level of abuse has become so obvious that really even the blind can see it. So I really just invite people to look reality in the face as long as you can still change it, because very soon this will be taken out of your hands, and all of us will have become just part of a mass of people that will be maneuvered by those in power.
Roger, you're closing the show.
Well, Kelly, you're in the background there somewhere. I want you to write out a transcript of what Nils just said, and I'm going to stand up tomorrow in the street and pretend to be him and read out what he just said, because there's no way I could put it better than that. That is so eloquent, but it's like a punch on the effing nose to these arseholes, because it's irrefutable. And I hope Vanessa Beretzer was watching that and was listening to it. And I hope that her heart was sinking. I hope she was flushed bright red. I hope she turned to stone in the face of that and went, what have I done? Realizing that what she has done is being a mindless, faithless, humorless, emotion-free puppet for the ruling elite. That she has nothing to do with the law, nothing to do with justice, and more importantly, nothing to do with the sacred platform upon which we all stand, which is that Declaration of Human Rights on the 10th of December in Paris in 1948. Without that platform for us all to stand on, we're all dead.
Wow. Well, somebody out there, if you're listening, please take the video of this on YouTube and translate or transcribe what Dr. Nils Melzer just read. And Nils, you really are, you're all heroes of mine. Nils, you've been such a special envoy for Julian Assange. You've been just fabulous. I know Roger always tunes in when you're on. So you got this magnetism about you and this genuine nature. And you're a man of incredible principles, and you really have galvanized. When you dropped in like a comet 2 years ago, you galvanized a lot of us, and thank you for your work. Gabriel, of course, thank you for and not thank you, but I think I know what you're going through. To have my brother in jail like that, or my mother, or my sister, would just be devastating. Chuck, keep on trucking, and Roger, we're going to go out. Speaking of Nils, we played your music earlier, so we're going to go out with your version. I think it's a fast version of Moonlight Sonata with some wonderful pictures that that Kelly put together. And I'm going to say goodbye to you. And you guys can watch this. And that'll be it. We'll see you tomorrow, folks, at exactly noon. I'll be there a few minutes early. I know Chuck will, with banners and stuff, on 47th and 2nd Avenue, 888 2nd Avenue. You can't miss it. It's right there, the British Embassy. Please get out there. Tell your friends to get out there. If you're in the UK and you have friends in New York, tell them to get out there. We need a big turnout tomorrow. It is really vital. I know with Roger and with Gabriel there, it will inspire a lot to go out. We're going to go out now. Thank you very much, Kelly, for another great engineering gig. And we're going out right now with Moonlight Sonata. I love you, Bianca. Bravo. Bravo. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nils. Thank you all. I know you stuck your neck out. Kelly just said